The bell above the door chimed as another customer walked into my boutique. I glanced up from the display table, offering a smile to Mrs. Peterson, one of my regulars. She was a woman of distinguished taste, always choosing the best scarves, handbags, and accessories. She loved the finer things, and I took pride in being the one to help her select them. As I moved toward her, I felt the familiar sense of calm that had defined my life for the past few years. Running this shop had become my world, my refuge. Just as I reached Mrs. Peterson, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message. I didn't look at it right away, continuing my conversation with Mrs. Peterson. She was discussing a new collection I had just gotten in, and I was listening carefully, nodding along as she weighed her options. But the buzzing continued, persistent, uninterrupted. Finally, curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced down at the screen. It was from Ryan, my husband. A simple message, but one that would change everything. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account. Haha. I read the message through once, then again. Slowly, I let out a breath. There was no shock, no tears. Just a quiet, cold clarity settling over me. It was as though the air in the room shifted, and I became acutely aware of the hum of the boutique around me, the soft sounds of heels clicking on the wooden floor, the muted conversations of other customers, the faint murmur of music in the background. All of it felt distant, almost irrelevant. Ryan's words hung in the air like a stale aftertaste, but I didn't flinch. I didn't even let my hand tremble as I held my phone. For a moment I wondered if I should feel anything: anger, sadness, disbelief. But the truth was I didn't. I felt nothing. I turned my attention back to Mrs. Peterson, who was still discussing the scarf. She didn't notice my momentary pause, nor did she sense the tightness in my chest or the coldness that had taken over me. Would you like to try that one on, Mrs. Peterson? I asked, my voice as steady as it had ever been. She nodded, and I walked with her to the fitting room, still holding my phone in the other hand. I wasn't sure if I would respond to Ryan's message right away. But I did know this. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to break down. I had done all that before. And I was done. As I helped Mrs. Peterson with the scarf, I wondered how Ryan thought I would react. He probably imagined I'd be devastated. He'd probably be waiting for me to beg him to stay, or worse, to plead for forgiveness. He had always expected me to be the one to hold everything together, to carry the emotional weight. I had always been the stable one, the provider, the one who made sure everything was in its place. But that had never been enough for him. It was never going to be enough. I wrapped up Mrs. Peterson's scarf and sent her on her way, all the while keeping my composure. When she left the shop, I locked the door behind her and stepped into the back office. The phone buzzed again. This time I didn't hesitate. I tapped the screen, reading the message as I sat down at my desk. Don't bother begging. Emily and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Emily, the new receptionist at Ryan's office. The one I had met at his company Christmas party. The one who laughed too loud at Ryan's jokes and touched his arm like she was his world. I had always sensed something was off about her, but I had never imagined this. For a brief moment I considered calling him, confronting him, but I knew that would be pointless. Ryan wasn't the type of man to face the consequences of his actions. He was a coward. Instead, I reached for my phone and dialed the number I had known I would need. Sarah, I said, my voice calm. It's time. There was a brief pause on the other end before my lawyer, Sarah Anderson, responded. I'll file the papers first thing tomorrow, she said. Do you want me to have him served in Miami? No rush, let him think he's won. Yes, I replied. Let him enjoy his little victory. I'll handle the rest. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair. This wasn't the first time Ryan had pushed me to the edge. I'd known for months that things weren't right between us. The late nights at the office, the sudden changes in his behavior, the password changes on his phone, the random trips he would take without telling me. A few months ago, I found a receipt for a dinner for two at an expensive restaurant on a night he'd claimed to be working late. The details didn't add up, and that was when I started to look more closely. I opened a separate account at a different bank just in case. A week later, Ryan mentioned wanting to combine our accounts to simplify things. I smiled and agreed, all the while quietly moving my savings into the new account. I knew what he was doing. He had no idea I was already 3 steps ahead. The joint account, the one he had just emptied, was nothing more than a decoy. It held just enough to avoid suspicion, but the real money was safely tucked away, hidden in accounts he couldn't touch. I could almost hear him gloating in Miami, enjoying his freedom with Emily, thinking that he had outsmarted me. But Ryan was always overconfident, and overconfidence was his biggest flaw. As I sat there contemplating the next steps, my phone buzzed once more. This time it was Ryan again. "I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy." Little shop. The word stung, but only for a second. I smiled bitterly. My boutique had been my lifeline, my success, and my sanctuary. It was thriving, doing better than Ryan's middle management job ever had. And yet, he still had the audacity to belittle it. Let him think what he wanted. Let him enjoy his moment. I would have the last laugh. I didn't bother replying to his message. Instead, I put my phone down, opened my laptop, and started going over the documents I had already prepared. I had everything I needed. Evidence. Records. A year's worth of receipts, text messages, and detailed financial statements. Ryan had no idea what was coming. As I closed the laptop and stood up to head back to the shop floor, I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over me. The storm was coming, but I was ready. In the end, it wouldn't be Ryan who had the last word. It would be me. Ryan had always been a complicated person, but it wasn't until the last few months that I began to notice the cracks in the foundation of our marriage. I wish I could say it came as a complete surprise when his betrayal became undeniable, but the signs had been there, and I had been too focused on my boutique to recognize them until it was almost too late. It started with the late nights. It wasn't unusual for Ryan to work late sometimes, but it became a regular occurrence. He'd leave the house after dinner, and I'd go to bed alone, just like I had for years. The first few times, I assumed it was just another late meeting or a project that needed his attention. But then, I noticed something that didn't sit right. Ryan's phone would buzz constantly in the middle of the night, and he'd shuffle out of bed to answer it, always turning his back to me, whispering into the receiver in hushed tones. When I asked him about it, he'd assure me it was nothing, just work. But the more I observed, the more I suspected something wasn't adding up. Ryan had always been attentive, affectionate even. But over the last few months, I noticed him pulling away. The small, affectionate gestures I'd once relied on, like a kiss on the forehead before bed or the simple act of holding my hand in public, had become rare. His mind seemed elsewhere, distant, as if he were looking past me, not through me. Then there was the sudden change in his habits. He started going to the gym obsessively. Ryan had never been out of shape, but he had always been a man who enjoyed his comfort. We both had our routines, dinners at home, lazy weekends, the occasional trip to a quiet place. But suddenly it was as if he was trying to become someone else. He bought new clothes, expensive ones. Clothes that didn't match his usual style. Shirts that were too tight for his softening middle. Pants that were uncomfortably slim. I started noticing the smallest things, like the way he started applying more cologne than usual, and his newfound obsession with looking younger, almost like he was trying to recapture his youth. But it wasn't just the superficial changes. No, it was the little things, the ones that couldn't be ignored. One evening, I found a receipt in the glove compartment of his car. It was for an upscale restaurant for 2 people, the same night Ryan had claimed to be working late. The receipt was dated, and the time matched perfectly with when he'd said he would be in a meeting. At that moment, my stomach tightened. I knew deep down that there was something more to these changes, but I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I did what I always did. I waited. I wasn't naive. I had learned long ago not to rush to conclusions without proof. So, I opened a separate bank account at a different bank. It wasn't the first time I'd thought about doing it, but the thought had always seemed unnecessary. That night, I transferred a significant portion of my personal savings to the new account. I kept it quiet, a simple move to safeguard myself, my future, my independence. When Ryan suggested that we combine our accounts to simplify things, I agreed. I did it with a smile, as if I had no reservations. But behind that smile, I was moving my money into the account he could never touch. I had already started preparing for this day. A week after moving my money, Ryan suggested that we simplify our finances by consolidating our joint account. I agreed cheerfully, making sure he never suspected that I had already made the changes needed to protect myself. And so when he emptied our joint account, I wasn't surprised. Not really. I had known this day was coming. I had been preparing for it in my own quiet way. I had done everything in my power to make sure that when it came to protecting myself, I would be ready. The morning after Ryan's final message to me, I set about my day as I had planned. I made sure the boutique was stocked and organized for the day's traffic. I had clients to meet, deliveries to process. The world outside of my little boutique seemed far away, almost like it wasn't part of my reality anymore. But in the back of my mind, I knew it was time to deal with the aftermath of Ryan's betrayal. I had thought long and hard about how I would approach this, about what my next move would be. The lawyer, Sarah Anderson, was already working on the divorce papers. I had no intention of rushing into the legal battle. No, I would let Ryan enjoy his victory, however fleeting it might be. He thought he had won. He thought he had outsmarted me. And for a brief moment I allowed him to believe that. But that wasn't going to be the end of it. I had everything in order. I had been watching, waiting. And now, as I sat at my desk, reviewing the documents that would seal the fate of my marriage, I made a discovery, one that would turn everything I thought I knew upside down. While I was sorting through a stack of papers Ryan had left behind, paperwork for the boutique, old tax returns, and other random files, I stumbled upon something that made my heart skip a beat. It was a contract, an investment agreement signed by Ryan himself. It was dated months before our separation, back when everything still seemed normal. The deal was for a real estate investment, one that Ryan had been involved in without my knowledge. As I skimmed through the contract, my pulse quickened. The document detailed a significant amount of money I hadn't known about being funneled into a project Ryan had been secretly working on. It wasn't just any investment. There was a clause hidden deep in the fine print. A provision that would allow Ryan to take control of a substantial amount of assets if we ever divorced. My blood ran cold. Ryan had been planning this for a long time. It wasn't just about his affair with Emily. No, it was about money, power, control. He had been hiding things from me for months, making sure that when the time came, he would have a backup plan, one that could secure him financially regardless of the fallout. And just like that, I understood. This wasn't just about him running off with Emily. This was about Ryan trying to secure his future at my expense. He had been playing a game all along, thinking that he could manipulate me and the situation in his favor. I took a deep breath, leaning back in my chair. The realization hit me hard, but it also ignited something deep inside me. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not this time. Not after everything we had been through. I immediately called Sarah. "Sarah, I found something," I said, my voice steady, but with a sense of finality. "We have more to work with here than I thought." Sarah listened as I explained the contract, the hidden clauses, and the secret investment Ryan had been involved in. I could hear the surprise in her voice, followed by the cool professionalism that had become her trademark. "This changes things," she said. "We'll use this to our advantage. You've been smart, Evelyn. Now we make sure Ryan doesn't walk away with anything." I hung up the phone and sat there for a moment, taking it all in. Ryan had made a critical mistake. He had underestimated me. He had assumed that his secret investments and his affair would be his shield. But now I had the upper hand, and I wasn't about to let go of it. The battle was just beginning. The days after Ryan's last message felt surreal. He seemed to believe that by leaving me, by sending me that final callous text, he had won. He thought he could move on with Emily, a 20-something girl who in his eyes was fresh and new, a way to erase the years he had spent with me. But Ryan had no idea how wrong he was. I wasn't surprised when the first text from him came a few hours after the legal papers had been filed. His words were predictable, dripping with condescension, aimed at getting a rise out of me. It was almost laughable. "Emily and I are settling in. You should see her, Evelyn. So much younger, so much more fun. I think she really gets me. Maybe you should have tried harder to understand me. Huh? But hey, at least you have your little shop to keep you busy. That's something." The message sat on my phone screen, blinking up at me, taunting me. It felt like a cheap shot, an attempt to make me feel small, irrelevant. But I didn't feel small. I felt something else, something far more powerful. It was as if Ryan's cruelty only confirmed what I had already known. His desperate need to put me down only exposed his own insecurities, his own fear of being left behind. I didn't respond. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reply. Instead, I went about my day, preparing for the final showdown. I called Sarah Anderson, my lawyer, the one who had been with me since the first signs of Ryan's betrayal, and asked her to meet with me. I needed to be one step ahead, and I trusted Sarah to guide me through this process. "Sarah," I said as soon as she picked up, my voice steady, almost detached. "Ryan's sending more messages. He's trying to get under my skin. He's talking about Emily again, trying to rub it in. I won't let it affect me, but I need to know the next steps. What's the best course of action?" Sarah was always professional, always calm, and her voice echoed that professionalism now. "He's trying to provoke you, Evelyn. That's all this is. Don't engage with him. Let's stick to the legal route. We have everything we need. And now, with the hidden investments, we have even more leverage." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I'm not backing down. Let's make sure we hit him where it counts." The legal papers were already being prepared, but we both knew it wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about exposing Ryan for the fraud he was, for everything he had tried to hide behind his lies. We had the evidence. We had his financial misconduct. We had his secrets. Now it was time to make sure the world saw it too. Ryan's texts didn't stop. Every day there was a new one, each more insulting than the last, each more designed to belittle me. But I kept my resolve. He couldn't break me anymore. I had weathered his abuse for far too long to let it bother me now. One of his messages stood out, though. It wasn't as taunting as the others. It wasn't about Emily or his new life in Miami. This one was a direct attempt to undermine my work, to degrade everything I had built. "Your boutique isn't anything special, Evelyn. You've always been so obsessed with your little shop. But it's nothing compared to what I've done. Your success was never about you. You were always just a pawn in this. I was the one who kept everything afloat." The words stung, but not for the reasons Ryan thought. They stung because they revealed just how little he truly understood about me, about what I had done for myself. He thought he could take credit for my work, my successes, just like he always had. He never saw my contributions, never valued the late nights I spent building my business from the ground up, never realized the sacrifices I made to create something I could be proud of. I had built the boutique on my own, after all. It wasn't a hobby, as he had once called it. It was my livelihood. It was the result of my dedication and passion. And now I was watching it grow. I had invested my own money, time, and energy into it. No one had helped me, and certainly not Ryan, whose middle management job had never once been as demanding as running a small business. His words hit me, but they also pushed me forward. I would make sure that he never had the chance to take credit for anything I had accomplished. Not now, not ever. I didn't reply to his message, of course. I didn't need to. The truth spoke for itself. Instead, I turned my attention back to the next big challenge, fighting Ryan's fraud head-on. I'd had enough of his lies, his manipulation, and his attempts to control me. It was time to turn the tables. I had been in contact with my bank about the fraudulent charges he had made on our joint credit card. As soon as I found out that he had used the card to fund his trips with Emily, I contacted the company and made sure they understood the gravity of the situation. I wasn't going to let Ryan get away with this. Not this time. "I need to report fraudulent charges," I told the bank representative, my voice calm but firm. "There are 2 first-class tickets to Miami and hotel charges that were made under my name. I need these canceled immediately. And I need Ryan Harrison removed as an authorized user on the account." The representative was professional, taking down the details, and promised to investigate immediately. "We'll take care of it, Mrs. Harrison. Thank you for bringing this to our attention." I hung up the phone and let out a sigh of relief. It wasn't the end, but it was a start. Ryan thought he could steal from me, thought he could wipe me out financially with a few swipes of a credit card. But he hadn't counted on me fighting back. I spent the rest of the day making sure all the legal and financial preparations were in place. Sarah and I had already discussed the next steps, and we were ready to move forward with the divorce proceedings. We had solid evidence of Ryan's misconduct, from his financial deceit to his betrayal in the marriage. We were building a case that would leave him with nothing. Later that afternoon, another text from Ryan appeared on my phone. This time it wasn't taunting me about Emily or the boutique. It was a message of what could only be described as desperation. "You're making a huge mistake, Evelyn. You're going to regret this. I've been good to you, but now you're forcing my hand. Maybe you'll realize it when it's too late." I stared at the message for a long moment. It was almost laughable, really. Ryan, the man who had lied to me, cheated on me, and taken everything he could, was now acting like I was the one who had wronged him. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the file Sarah had prepared for me and began reviewing the legal documents again. It was time to finish this. Ryan wasn't going to win. Not this time. I had fought for years to build my life, my business, and my peace of mind. And I wasn't about to let him take it all away without a fight. As I prepared for the next stage of the battle, I knew that Ryan was in for a rude awakening. He had underestimated me, just like he had underestimated everything I had done. But the truth was, the battle wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and everything that was rightfully mine. And this time I was going to win. Days turned into weeks after the divorce papers were filed. Ryan and Emily were living together in his Miami apartment, or so I imagined. The first few days felt almost like a strange, heavy silence had descended upon the city. For me, it was a relief. I had taken back control of my life and had no intention of letting him drag me down any further. But for Emily, things were starting to unravel. I couldn't help but feel a tiny bit of satisfaction when I thought about the mess Ryan was creating for himself. He had run off with a younger woman, convinced that life with her would be easier, more exciting, more fulfilling. But I knew Ryan. I knew how easily he could deceive himself, how he convinced himself that running away from his problems would be the solution. I didn't have to be a psychic to know that the reality of his actions would catch up with him soon enough. I had been right. Emily, who once seemed like a sweet, naive girl, was starting to see the cracks in Ryan's facade. She hadn't realized it yet, but the man she thought she knew was not the same person she had been seeing for the last few months. And one late night, as the apartment grew still and Ryan dozed off, she stumbled upon the truth. She had been tossing and turning, unable to sleep, the weight of the reality of her new life with Ryan bearing down on her. She had never expected him to be the person he was now. The charm, the flirtations, the carefully curated image of success. It was all beginning to feel hollow. She found herself pacing the apartment, thinking about all the things that had happened since Ryan and I had parted ways, and how quickly her own relationship with him had escalated. In the middle of her insomnia-driven restlessness, she went through some of Ryan's things, looking for something to distract herself, something that could explain the unease she was feeling. That's when she came across Ryan's phone, left unattended on the coffee table. It was a habit Ryan had, never locking his phone, trusting that no one would ever look through it. And in that moment, Emily found something she wasn't meant to see. Emails, text messages. And not just from me though, of course I had been the most recent casualty in his web of lies. As Emily scrolled through the messages, her heart sank. She found messages from Ryan to someone named Lisa. The dates of the messages went back years, long before she had come into the picture. There were long threads of conversations that painted a picture of deceit that ran far deeper than anything Emily had realized. Ryan had been with Lisa for a while, even before he'd begun his affair with Emily. The messages were explicit, full of inside jokes, intimate exchanges, and planning for secret meetings. And that wasn't all. Further down, Emily found more messages from another woman, Charlotte, a name she didn't recognize. The conversation had the same pattern as the first. Secret meetings, flirtation, and most alarmingly, Ryan's usual line of, "You're the one who understands me." These were words he had said to Emily as well, and in that moment everything began to click for her. Ryan wasn't just a man who had left his wife for a younger woman. He wasn't just a man who had cheated once. He was a serial cheater, a liar. And Emily had been nothing more than the next in line, the newest pawn in his game of deception. He had used her, just as he had used me, and just as he had used the other women before her. Emily's stomach churned as she sat there, reading through the messages, realizing that she had been played. Her heart broke in that moment. Not because of Ryan's betrayal of her, though that stung, but because she had been so blind to it all. She thought she was the one he truly cared for, the one who had finally caught his attention, the one who would make him change. But now she realized that he had never cared about her, not in the way she had imagined. He was just a man running away from his own insecurities, trying to fill a void that could never be filled by anyone. And in that moment, Emily knew what she had to do. She picked up her phone and typed a message. It was short, simple, but it carried the weight of everything she had just learned. Evelyn, I'm sorry. I should have never trusted him. He's been lying to me just like he lied to you. You were right all along. I should have seen it sooner. I'm sorry for everything. She hit send. Then she collapsed onto the couch, her tears falling freely. In the silence of the apartment, she knew one thing for certain. She had to leave Ryan. Back in my own world, I focused on my boutique. The success of my business was my priority, and every day, I found myself immersing myself deeper into work. The boutique had grown, and my latest collection was flying off the shelves. I had worked hard for every inch of success I'd gained, and I wasn't about to let anyone, especially Ryan, take that away from me. But while I focused on my business, Ryan's family was still trying to make sense of the chaos he had created. It didn't take long before I heard from his mother, Barbara. She had always been polite to me, though she was a bit distant. I assumed she had always been more protective of Ryan, but I never imagined her reaction would be so blunt. Evelyn, she began, her voice trembling over the phone. I know this isn't easy for you, but I've heard things. I don't understand why you're doing this. Ryan has always been a good man. He's been going through a lot, and I don't think it's fair how you're treating him now. You're being so cold and controlling. You drove him away, Evelyn. I hope you realize that. The words stung, but I didn't let it show. It wasn't the first time someone tried to make me feel guilty about Ryan's actions, but it didn't hurt any less. Barbara was his mother after all, and I knew how hard this must be for her. She had raised him, and I'm sure in her eyes, he was still the little boy she had cared for all these years. I'm sorry you feel that way, Barbara, I said, my voice as steady as ever. But the truth is, Ryan made his own decisions. He chose to lie to betray me, and now he has to deal with the consequences of those actions. I didn't force him to do anything. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Barbara sighed deeply. I just want you to know, Evelyn, she said, her voice softer now, that I don't think Ryan has always been like this. I don't think he meant for things to go this way. But maybe you should have tried harder. Maybe you should have tried to understand him better. I was tempted to argue, to list the ways Ryan had wronged me, to remind Barbara of all the times he had shut me out or belittled me. But I knew it wouldn't help. Instead, I simply replied, I've always done what I thought was best. And now I'm doing what's best for me. Barbara seemed to take a deep breath. I guess you're right. But I still wish things could have turned out differently. I ended the call shortly after that. I didn't feel bad, though. I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I had done what I could. Ryan had made his choices, and I had learned to stop letting him dictate my happiness. I looked at the phone for a moment, then set it down on the counter. A thought crossed my mind. Barbara might have been in denial about her son, but I had learned to accept that I couldn't control other people's perceptions. What mattered now was my future. I had already built something for myself, something I could be proud of. And as I looked at the boutique, with its vibrant displays and buzzing customers, I realized that the life I had fought for was far more valuable than any apology or acknowledgement from Ryan or his family. It was time to move forward, and this time I would do it on my terms. As I prepared for another busy day at the boutique, I realized that the best revenge wasn't about making Ryan pay. It was about making myself stronger. It was about being the woman I had always known I could be: independent, resilient, and unapologetically in control of my own destiny. And no one, not even Ryan, could take that from me. The day of the divorce hearing arrived, and with it, a sense of calm determination settled over me. After everything that had happened, every betrayal, every sleepless night, I was ready. This wasn't just about closing a chapter on my marriage. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, securing my future, and standing up for myself in a way I never had before. Sarah Anderson, my lawyer, was already at the courthouse when I arrived. She greeted me with a smile that conveyed both warmth and quiet strength. I had learned to rely on her, not just as a legal advisor, but as someone who truly understood what this battle meant for me. She had been with me through every step of this process, guiding me with calm precision. Inside the courtroom, Ryan was already there, sitting stiffly next to his lawyer. I could see the unease in his eyes, the slight twitch of his fingers as he fidgeted nervously with a pen. The man who had once exuded confidence was now a shell of that person, and it was satisfying to see. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in for him, and he knew there was no way out. Sarah stepped forward, her voice strong as she began presenting our case. She methodically laid out every piece of evidence we had gathered. The messages from Ryan, admitting to withdrawing money from our joint account. The records showing the fraudulent use of our credit card to book flights and a hotel for his trips with Emily. It was all there, undeniable proof of his deceit. The cold, hard facts were being laid bare for everyone to see. Ryan's lawyer tried to argue, but it was clear he was grasping at straws. There was no way to dispute the truth. We had everything in place: messages, receipts, and statements that painted a clear picture of Ryan's betrayal and financial misconduct. My lawyer's confidence only seemed to intensify with each piece of evidence presented. As the hearing continued, I could feel the tension building in the room. Ryan had started shifting in his seat, his eyes darting around as if looking for some way to escape the inevitable. The man who had once been so smug, so certain that he could control the situation, was now starting to panic. It was when Sarah presented the final piece of evidence that Ryan truly cracked. She handed over a printout of the account freeze orders and explained that all of our shared assets would be locked until further proceedings. This meant that Ryan couldn't touch any of the money he had drained from our joint account, and he would be forced to return the full amount within 24 hours. Ryan's face turned pale. The arrogance he had displayed just days earlier had disappeared. His eyes widened as he realized the gravity of the situation. The money he had stolen, the power he had tried to wield, he was about to lose it all. I saw him glance over at Emily's family, who had been supportive of him at the start, but now I could tell they were losing faith in his ability to salvage anything. "Your Honor," Ryan began, his voice shaky, "this is all just a misunderstanding. Evelyn and I are marriage. It's complicated. You don't know the whole story." His words were desperate, but they fell flat. "I'm sure it is," Sarah replied coolly, "but the facts speak for themselves. The evidence is clear. Ryan Harrison deliberately siphoned funds from a joint account, misused shared credit cards, and has shown a pattern of dishonest behavior." The judge, who had been silent throughout the proceedings, finally spoke, her voice stern. "Mr. Harrison, you admitted to fraudulently withdrawing funds and using shared assets for personal gain. There is no room for misinterpretation here. As a result, I am ordering the immediate freeze of all joint assets, and you are required to return the stolen funds within 24 hours. Ryan's face twisted in frustration as he slumped in his seat, defeated. He had no defense, no escape. And in that moment I realized that this was my victory. It wasn't just about the money, the property, or the business. It was about taking back control, about showing him that he couldn't destroy me. The hearing concluded shortly after, and while I walked out of the courtroom with a sense of finality, I also felt something else: a deep satisfaction. I had won. But more than that, I had fought for myself in a way I never had before. In the days that followed, I began to see the ripple effects of Ryan's actions. His financial misconduct had not only cost him his assets, but also his relationship with Emily. I had always known that Ryan's self-destructive behavior would eventually catch up to him, but it wasn't until I saw the fallout firsthand that I realized just how deep the cracks in his life had run. I was back at the boutique, surrounded by the familiar hum of customers browsing and trying on clothes. Business had been booming, and I was more focused than ever on growing my empire. The success of my shop wasn't just about the sales. It was a testament to the strength I had found in myself. People began to see me not just as the wife of a man who had betrayed me, but as an independent businesswoman who had built something from scratch. The support I received from the community was overwhelming. I began receiving messages from customers who had heard about my story, and many of them came into the shop just to show their support. It wasn't just about buying clothes, it was about standing with me, recognizing the resilience it took to overcome everything I had been through. One afternoon, as I was going over the latest inventory and placing new orders, I saw a familiar face walk into the boutique. It was Amanda, Ryan's sister. She hadn't reached out to me much since the divorce proceedings began, but I couldn't say I was surprised to see her. "I've been hearing a lot about you," Amanda said, offering me a tentative smile. She seemed somewhat nervous, which was unlike her. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you, Evelyn. I didn't realize how much Ryan had put you through until everything came out. I was caught off guard by her honesty. For years I had felt like an outsider in Ryan's family, never fully accepted, always seen as the one who kept him grounded. But now, I could see that Amanda was beginning to realize the truth about her brother. Thank you, Amanda, I said, offering a small smile. I appreciate that. It's been a long road, but I'm doing okay now. The boutique is doing well, and that's what matters. She nodded, glancing around the store, taking in the displays of luxury handbags and new arrivals. I can see that. You've built something really impressive here. And I want you to know, I'm sorry for how things went down. I know it wasn't easy, and I can't imagine how it must have felt. Her words struck me in a way I hadn't expected. Ryan's family had always been difficult to read, but now it seemed like they were starting to see things more clearly. As I continued to work on my orders and plans for the next expansion of my boutique, I couldn't help but think about Ryan. I wondered how he was handling everything now. After all the lies, the manipulation, and the destruction he had caused, it seemed like the weight of the world was finally on his shoulders. And I didn't feel sorry for him. Not anymore. The next few weeks saw the further unraveling of Ryan's life. Emily, who had once seemed so confident in her new life with him, began posting on social media about the difficulties she was facing in their relationship. She shared her frustrations, how she had expected a fairy tale but found herself living in a nightmare. It was clear that the charm Ryan had once used to captivate her was no longer working. Emily's posts about toxic relationships and learning from mistakes became more frequent, and I could only imagine how Ryan must have felt seeing her public admissions of disillusionment. It wasn't long before Emily packed her things and moved out of Ryan's apartment. She left him without a word, and I could only wonder if she had finally realized she had been just another chapter in his long history of deceit. I didn't wish her any harm, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of validation. She had seen the truth just as I had. As for Ryan, his life continued to spiral. He had spent so much time trying to control everyone around him, trying to build a life on lies, that when the truth came crashing down, he had nothing left. His job, his relationship with his family, and his finances, all of it was in tatters. For me, though, life was moving forward. The boutique continued to thrive, and I was in the process of opening a new location. I had found a sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that I had done the right thing, that I had taken control of my life when it mattered most. I looked around at the store, at the loyal customers, at the thriving business I had built. This was my victory. This was my triumph. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not even Ryan, take that away from me. It had been a year since the divorce, a year since everything fell apart, and in that time, I had built something that surpassed anything I had ever imagined. The boutique had grown exponentially, thriving in a way I hadn't even dared to hope. What began as a small, modest store in a quiet corner of town was now an established brand with multiple locations. I had expanded into other cities, opened new branches, and built an online store that catered to customers from across the country. The business had taken on a life of its own, and it felt like I was watching a dream unfold before my eyes. Each new day brought more growth, more opportunities. I worked tirelessly, constantly innovating, pushing myself to create better collections, improve customer service, and expand the brand's reach. But more than that, the success of the boutique was a personal triumph. It was proof that I could survive, that I could rebuild after everything Ryan had tried to destroy. I had become something more than I had ever been in my marriage. I was a woman in control of her own destiny. A woman who had learned to trust her instincts and fight for what was hers. The freedom I felt every morning when I walked into my store, knowing I was in charge, was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I was no longer just Ryan's wife, I was Evelyn Harrison, a successful businesswoman who had taken charge of her life and made her dreams come true. But of course, as with all successes, there was always someone lurking in the background, trying to undermine you. And in my case, it was Ryan and his family. As much as I had moved on, the gossip and rumors about me continued to swirl, especially among Ryan's family. Word got back to me that Ryan was still trying to rebuild his image, trying to present himself as the wronged party, as the man who had been betrayed by me. It was laughable, but I couldn't ignore the fact that his family, especially his mother and sister, had started to question him. Ryan's own family had started to see the cracks in his facade. Barbara, his mother, had once been so quick to defend him, but now she was distant. She had called me a few times trying to apologize for her previous comments, but I had no interest in revisiting the past. Ryan's sister Amanda had even stopped by the boutique a couple of times to show support, and each time she seemed more and more disillusioned with her brother's actions. It wasn't hard to see why. Ryan had tried to paint himself as the victim, claiming I had pushed him away, that I had forced him to seek out someone younger, someone more fun. But the truth had caught up with him, and his lies were slowly unraveling. His financial misdeeds, the affairs, the lies, they all caught up with him, and no amount of charm or manipulation could save him anymore. His attempts to salvage his reputation only made him look worse in the eyes of the people who had once been closest to him. As for Emily, she had moved on from Ryan as well. Her posts on social media became less frequent, and it was clear that she was distancing herself from him. She had learned the hard way just as I had. I had seen a few of her posts about healing, learning from mistakes, and finding strength after being taken advantage of. She was no longer the naive girl who had fallen for Ryan's lies. I admired her strength for walking away, but I also knew that the experience had shaped her in a way she couldn't have predicted. But while Ryan's life continued to implode, mine only grew brighter. The success of my business was something I could be proud of. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the independence, the freedom, and the ability to build something for myself, something that was mine and mine alone. I received messages from women who admired my resilience, who saw my story as an inspiration. Many of them were in difficult relationships or stuck in jobs they didn't love, and they saw me as an example of how it was possible to start over, to rebuild, to thrive. Some of them were like Emily Young, unsure of their worth, learning hard lessons about self-respect and independence. And that, in a way, was the greatest success of all. The day of the 5th anniversary of my boutique arrived, and I stood in front of my store, looking around at the bustling customers, the vibrant displays, and the team of people who had helped me get here. It had been 5 years since I first opened the doors of the shop, and looking at everything I had built, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This wasn't just a business. This was my life, my passion, and my story. I stood there, taking it all in, and for a moment, I let myself reflect on everything that had led me here. The struggles, the pain, the heartbreak, and ultimately, the strength I had discovered in myself. If someone had told me years ago that I would be standing here today, I would have laughed. But now, as I stood surrounded by the fruits of my labor, I realized just how far I had come. I had learned how to protect myself, how to stand up for myself, and most importantly, how to never let anyone diminish my worth. The door opened and one of my employees, Laura, came in holding a framed photograph. "Evelyn, we thought you'd like this," she said, handing it to me with a smile. I took the frame from her, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a screenshot of the last text Ryan had sent me, the one where he had arrogantly told me that my little shop would never amount to anything. At the time it had stung. I had been hurt, humiliated even. But now, looking at the framed text, I saw it for what it really was. A reminder of how far I had come. It was no longer a symbol of his cruelty, but of my strength, my resilience, and my success. I placed the frame on the counter near the cash register, where I could see it every day. It was a reminder to me, and to anyone who might need it, that strength isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving in spite of everything life throws at you. Later that evening, as I stood in the boutique, watching the last of the customers leave and the lights dim, I felt a deep sense of contentment. I had fought for this. I had built this with my own hands, my own vision. I had turned my pain into power, my heartbreak into a stepping stone. I knew that this was just the beginning. There were more stores to open, more goals to reach, and more women to inspire. The journey wasn't over, but as I stood there in the quiet of the shop, I felt a sense of peace that I had never known before. And as I looked at the photograph of that last text from Ryan, I smiled because it no longer held any power over me. It was simply a piece of my past, proof that sometimes, the best revenge is simply living well, thriving, and never allowing anyone to define your worth. The story wasn't just about me and Ryan. It was about all the women who had ever felt small, unseen, or trapped. It was about showing them that they could take control of their own lives, build their own success, and never settle for less than they deserved. And I was proof of that.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for updates on new videos. See you next time.